Hi, welcome back to the channel, and this is Kevin Hart's garage as featured last week. If you've not seen it, there'll be links above and below. Well, today I'm going to cover the builds of all the cars here, so you will not want to watch all of this video. It's going to be very long. I'm providing you chapter markers, so just go to the build of the car that you are interested in. I'll try to rattle through each build a little bit quicker than I normally do, so if that does leave you with a question or comment, just leave that down below. Now we're going to start off with the build of mint condition, which is Kevin's very expensive, almost $1 million C1 Corvette based on the coquette black fin. Now in real life this is basically a very fast version of a C7 Corvette with the frame and the engine, and then the C1 has been popped on top. And that's quite handy because in the game this is actually a pretty fast version of a C1 Corvette anyway. My previous build on the car was remarkably similar to this one, and I've decided after this garage tour to keep the car just like this. It is a crew colour for the green, and I've linked that down below. I'm not going to talk about performance parts on any of these cars, any of the tuning, because it's fairly irrelevant, just the bodywork. So for the bumpers on this, a stock front bumper is the nearest we're going to get. There are no back bumper options. We also want a stock chassis, we don't want that roll cage. Nearest I could get on the exhaust was the straight exit exhausts. And for the hood, the performance hood actually looked pretty close, I was pleased with that one. For the primary colour then, I mentioned it's a crew colour, the hex is in the description. It's actually Mosport Green from GTAcolours.com, and I thought it looked so close, no point in making it my own. I added a silver pearl to that, and the secondary is ice white. We don't have an interior colour on the car that we can do. That's a bit unfortunate. Moving on, just roof is no roof. We don't want a spoiler. And it's already very low on stock suspension, so I didn't want to make it any lower, so stock there. And finally the wheels, we go into the muscle category, and from there we go into the chrome and select turbine. They're not perfect, but I think they're closest we're going to get. There is no window option, although we would not be taking it if there was, so that completes the build of Kevin Hart's Corvette C1 mint condition. Okay, second car is Droppa, the Pontiac GTO, and a couple of things about this one. Firstly, why didn't I build it on the Arbiter GT? I've been asked before, and the answer is simply I don't have an Arbiter GT because I'm on PC, we never got the car. However, this particular car, the Sabre Turbo, does look really close, and this is built on the custom to get the interior. Secondly, I was disappointed during editing to find I had a tyre design on the car which was not there when I built it, but it must have been there after it was stored for a while. I've had this happen before where I've built a car for a video, come back months later to use it, and a part has mysteriously changed. I don't know why, and I'm sorry I didn't notice and I let it creep into the video. Anyway, for the full build on this car, you won't find it here because I've already done a complete episode on the car, so again I'll try and link it on a fancy card on the top right, but if not, don't worry, it's linked below. All I'm going to do here in the workshop then is get rid of that tyre design. So back in the garage for car number 3, and a bit of behind the scenes info. You can see what I'm doing here is emptying out the garage, for I have just one fully empty garage that I can use for things like this, and all the other ones are rammed full, to be honest. So we're going to look now at the build of Bane, and Bane is, as you already have seen, Kevin Hart's $1 million resto modded 1970 Dodge Challenger. It's got a 7-litre Elephant engine in, makes 1,000 horsepower for goodness sake, so quite an incredible car. Anyway, let's see how we build it. If only we could make it look as cool as the real one. Anyway, for the front bumpers we're just going to go with the primary stock to at least paint it black, but we are missing of course some of the stuff below the bumper that simply isn't available on the GTA car. Primary stock on the back, again stock chassis without roll cage. On the exhaust I decided in the end to go with the anodized exhausts. They are most certainly not perfect, but the closest I could find. We don't want any grills on the front fenders, and I went for primary section grills on the front has been the closest overall. On the hood, they're not the correct scoops, of course. I think they were custom scoops. The twin intake hood is the closest we are going to get here. It's also a good hood generally for the Challenger, as it happens. The rear fenders, again, I don't want any grills, so none. The respray is just a classic black, so that's very simple. The secondary, I've just had a quick flick through. Nothing is lighting up. I just think it's only for secondary parts, which we're not using. So up to you, I guess. Moving on to the trim colour, thank goodness we do have the option, and I went Cabernet Red to give a dark red because Bane does have a dark red interior. We want a primary roof, primary custom skirt, that paints over the chrome line that you get if you leave it stock. No spoiler, and the suspension competition, getting the car really low just like Bane is. And for the wheels, we want to go into the street category, and in there we find concave mega mesh, and of course we're going to paint those in black. Now Bane does not have any tinted glass, so that completes the build of this really stunning car, and the only question is, do I make something else with it, or do I keep it like this? I haven't decided yet. Moving on then to Dark Knight, built on the Willard Faction Custom. Now, I built this car miles before this garage tour. I think my car's been like this almost since my big 300 car garage tour last year. I had the Faction and the Faction Custom, and I spent some time trying to work out whether I was going to keep them both, because there weren't that many builds I really liked on them. In the end, I got rid of the standard Faction. I kept the Custom and I built Kevin's car on it, so I thought that was probably the coolest build I'd seen on the car. I'm really pleased with it, and I'm going to keep the car just like this. It's a Benny's car, so I've come to Benny's, but that is actually a little bit of a mistake, as we'll see. You don't need to. I went with the big bore exhaust, and for the hood I went with the power bulge hood, which quite neatly references the hood on Kevin's car. The boot doesn't matter, I don't have anything selected in there. Now for the trim design, I just want the stock trim. The other trims do look a bit lowrider, which we don't want. And for the trim colour, Harbour Blue gets very close to the sort of grey blue that Kevin has inside his car. Now all the other things in here, all the Benny's specials, I've just got them as stock, and really this is why I didn't need to come to Benny's, but you'll see another reason why not to go to Benny's in a minute. So I went square speakers here. I don't think you need to, I just felt it made them slightly more subtle. And again, the light colour I picked silver. I don't think it really matters what you pick. I've got the stock lights on here. You might feel on a car that Kevin spent so much on, perhaps you feel like putting car meat lights on it. Might look a bit better. No livery, of course. I just went with low and slow on the plate holder. You could go with almost anything really here. I was just trying to give it a little bit of interest. Certainly went with a black plate because I think that sits so much better on the car. I mean, you could even go for one of those vanity plates if you wanted to. For the respray, well, that was simple, of course. It's just classic black here on the primary, and on the secondary, I think I'm right in saying, yeah, classic black again. This is another option, another place you can put the trim colour in on the car. And for the roof, I've gone for no roof because I want the lift out T-panels, and the other two options aren't quite right, so easier just to have the panels already lifted out. Again, I'm not taking any options in the trunk, I don't care about that. When we get to wheels, here's our big problem. These wheels are in the street category, which for some reason is not available at Benny's, so hang on a second. Okay, back in my auto shop, you can select all the options you need here anyway for the car, and I've gone for the deep flake wheels, and the colour is black. They're pretty close. Do all your usual stuff. I'd forgotten bulletproof tyres on this car, so I'll pop those on here as well. And that completes the build of Dark Knight. For the fourth build, which is Kevin's AMG G65, the G-Wagon, I used the Dubster 2, and I got the game to naturally spawn me a Dubster 2 because I didn't want to change the build on the one I already had. Now that's pretty easy to do, and if you don't know the method, I'll leave a video down below to Harm Nunn's video on how to spawn a Dubster 2. He makes it very clear in there what you need to do. It's quite possible that this build is doable on the standard Dubster, the one you can just take from the street, because I'm actually stripping off most of the parts. So have a look, and if that works, well, that's a little bit easier for you. I'm using here a satin paint colour by applying, I think it's a dark steel pearlescent to matte black paint. It's a trick you can do only at Los Santos Customs, and I have a video on how to do that. If you don't want to do it, just popping the matte colour on will get you fairly close, because even the matte colours reflect a little bit in this game. So turning here the Dubster 2 into Kevin's car, I'd say probably pretty similar on a Dubster 1. Stock front bumper to get rid of the winches, and for the exhaust I've no idea what he has, so I just put a stock exhaust on. Stock fenders, also a stock hood to get rid of the spare tyre that I think is normally on there. I've gone stock lights for it's a car I was not keeping, but if I was keeping it I would pop the car meet lights on there. Just went for a black plate to match. Now for the respray, as I say, a satin black, or you could go for a matte black. It looks blue in the photo and I couldn't find any other photos, and I made the decision that that was more of a colour cast, and in line with Kevin's favourite car colour, it was almost undoubtedly a black car really. If you think I'm wrong, well of course go for one of the dark matte blues in the game instead. Most of the car is stock in fact, so is the roof, again taking off the extra parts that were put on. I went with stock suspension because it's already quite low this, and I'd like it a touch higher. For the wheels, straight into the high-end category and selecting stock Cheetah RR and then painting them in black. And you've guessed it, full limo on the windows, and that completes the build of the G65. Ah, you clicked this chapter mark. Well, I thought you would. This is going to be quite a popular build, I think. It was requested by Cody, and they asked if I could build this, and this request actually came out even before the car was released. I think as soon as we knew we were getting this car, so Cody's been waiting quite a time for this. And what Cody doesn't know is that that request was the nucleus for the garage tour, because I already had Dark Knight, the Buick. So once I was going to build a second Kevin Hart car, that's it. I may as well build 8 more. You may remember from the garage tour that Kevin Hart did, it was either a show or a complete tour, and it was called What Now, and he was gifted this Jeep for the tour, and so he named it after the tour and simply called it What Now Jeep Wrangler. So let's see about getting this built. As always, I'm not talking about the performance parts etc, although this car is pretty much maxed out. Starting with the arch covers, well we want these to be painted, so that's simple, painted arches. And moving on to the bumpers. The painted heavy duty bumper is very close. We get the hooks, albeit not painted. We get the bit on the top. They're too wide here. They should be narrower, but the narrow bumper is much further off in every other respect. And of course a painted heavy duty bumper at the back to match. We want stock doors. With the exhaust I don't have a picture, but I can't imagine that Kevin would have a stock exhaust like this. I'm sure there'd be something a bit showier, so I've gone for the twin chrome exhaust here. The painted heavy duty grille is not bad. It helps with the cut down headlights, and we get the vertical pieces here from the Jeep grille. It's not perfect, but I think it's the best. Same story with the hood. I don't think this is perfect, but the limited edition hood I think gets closest to the hood on Kevin's, at least from what I could see. The stock lights I think look great on the car. I haven't changed them, and I don't intend to. There's no livery of course on this car, and the plate is up to you, but I've gone for the black plate obviously to merge in with the car. Classic black for the primary and for the secondary, and black for the interior, so a bit of a theme there. Painted roof. For the skirts, we want minimal skirts, and the most minimal actually are just to stay with the stock skirts. For the spare wheel, well, I couldn't see a picture, and I didn't really want this, where you get the wrong wheel. Wasn't even sure about the cover. I just thought, it looks cooler with it removed, so that's why it's removed. If you know better than me, do what you know is on the car. For the wheel type, I couldn't get perfect, but in the street category, these rough weld mega deeps that you'd probably normally be putting on, I don't know, a drift car or something, but they seem to get quite close in the overall shape, look and feel. So they are what I have put on. I'm pleased with those. I think they're great. You can guess the colour, black, and the windows blacked out. So it's very much an all black build. Don't forget your bulletproof tyres, regardless really of what else you put on the car. Windshield accessories, the light bar. Now this is really good. I don't want the little bits down in the corner here, but overall that light bar is what Kevin has, so it's perfect. And it completes the build of what now? Jeep Wrangler. I might change the Wrangler build in the future, but for now I am going to continue to store it as Kevin's car. So moving on now to the first in the US. In other words, he had the first SF90 Spider in the United States. And you'll see some photos of it with standard Ferrari wheels, and you'll see some photos of it with a rather more sort of dark copper coloured aftermarket wheel by HRE. So I obviously chose to build it with the aftermarket wheels that he put on later. A few months ago I released a video of this car built, has the SF90 XX, and that's how I intend to store the car. So in fact, straight after this filming, it is going back to be the XX, because I just find that a bit more visually arresting than a black one with some fancy wheels. This is a relatively simple build on the car, and a huge amount of it is in fact stock. So starting on the bumpers, they're stock on the front and on the rear. For the exhaust, I use the chrome triple bore exhaust for reasons I explained on the XX video. The hood is stock. Lights, you could go stock or car meet. There's no livery, so we're straight onto the mirrors, which may be no surprise, are stock. I went, of course, for the black number plate. I can't use my Ferrari one at the moment, thanks Rockstar. The carbon slipstream panel in here is accurate for most of the SF90s, so I assumed it was for Kevin's. Just went classic black on the respray and on the secondary colour, and indeed on the trim, so that's pretty simple. From what I can see, the Spiders have a flip out shiny black roof, so the easiest thing there was just to go stock roof, and of course pretend it's a Spider with the roof up. There's no additional spoiler on the back. Like many Ferraris, it's not the lowest sitting in the world, so it's stock suspension, a stock tail fin to go on the roof, and for the HRE wheels into the track category and Ice Storm, and I painted Ice Storm in a dark ivory, because I find in this game that dark ivory makes me think copper, and the dark copper makes me think gold, and gold usually makes me think too bright. Of course, if you've got HSW, you've got a bigger pick of wheel colours, so by all means try to find something better. Onto the window tints, I think a light or a dark smoke would work. I actually went with the dark smoke on that. That completes the build of this car, and as I say, straight afterwards it's gone back to this, which is the XX, and just search XX in the channel if you want to see the video on this build. But now onto the very heavily modified Camaro, simply called Bad News. The car you see here, the one you saw in the tour, has Mercy concave wheels. I had a change of heart, no pun intended, about those, and also I accidentally, as I mentioned in the comments, put tinted windows on Bad News, and it does not have tinted windows. As a result, rather than rebuilding the one here we're driving to the workshop, after I got rid of it, I stole another one and had another go. I mean, look at this. This is absolutely phenomenal looking, and it's going to be really hard on a Vaquero off the street to even get close to that. But anyway, let's pop it through, have another quick go. Unfortunately, there's no bumper or grille options, so we're straight down to exhaust, and Bad News does have two rear exhausts, although the back end of Bad News is much better than this one. The stock hood, thank goodness, is about correct, so we can use that. As far as the insurance goes, I haven't insured this one. I need to get rid of it afterwards. For the plate, I go for a black plate. I think that just looks a bit better. And for the respray, it's supposed to be what the articles call a satin black. It looks to me like a slightly off black. So I went into metallic and just picked one of the blacks that wasn't quite as black as black. Now, I think I used anthracite when it was actually on display, but you could also pick something like carbon black. And then for the pearlescent, again, I went for something that's almost non-existent, just the tiniest bit of pearlescent to very slightly change the look. Indoors, you can barely tell it's not just black. On the roll cage, just no roll cage. For the spoiler, I haven't got a rear photo for you here, but the drag wing is actually very close to the rear spoiler on bad news. Of course, bad news is really low, and if we go sport suspension here, it's luckily not far off. The main reason I wanted to rebuild the car was the wheels. So I used Mercy Concave to get multi-spoke black, but they were not the right shape. I'm going to show you one now and one after the build. The one I think is probably much better is Ground Ride. If you look at Ground Ride, the shape of the spokes, the way they are inset and dished, the Ground Ride painted black are bang on in every respect, apart of course from having a chrome rim. Now that is the slight downside to these wheels, but they do otherwise look very good, and in isolation, when you're not sat there comparing to photographs, are perhaps the more convincing of the two. Quickly finishing before our alternative, we don't want any tinted windows, we don't want a wheelie bar. So I had the wrong wheel but managed all black. I had the right wheel but ended up with chrome. If you go into the street class, you can select Wild Wagon. Now this might be a good halfway house between those two wheels. The spokes are the right shape, but there are too many of them. There's also a slight curve at the end, although that's harder to see when everything is black. And I say at least you can paint the whole wheel, so is this the sweet spot of the least wrong wheel? Up to you. You have three choices. And talking of three, I had already traded in 2 cars today, and you can only trade in 2 per day, and I do really need to get on with things, so I only really had one solution here, I'm afraid. Safety first, make sure all pedestrians are clear, make sure all cars are clear. Okay, that's that sorted. Our 9th build then is the Mustang, the Shelby GT500E from '67. Basically this is Kevin Hart's Eleanor, and there's not too much to change. The front bumper is stock. The exhaust is the side exit exhaust with custom hood, the same one you would use I think if you're building an actual Eleanor. I do have a build for that somewhere on the channel actually. Stay with the LOE stock lights. For the livery, I want silver. I can't have it, so classic twin white stripe is what we're actually going to go for. Again, I've gone with the black number plate. Respray is a classic black for the primary, that's the only colour. You could put a sun strip on because he has a tint there, but they are too bold, so I didn't bother. Lowered suspension looks about right. You could almost go stock as well, either works. With the wheels you go into lowrider, stock rims and choose wired, painting the centres black. Now this is great for giving you those knockoff hubcaps with the 3 distinct parts on them, although what's behind the hubcaps is wrong. So you could select Big Mamba from the street category, painting the centres black. Now this gives a nice bit for behind the knockoff hubcap, but of course you lose the hubcap. These are often used on Eleanor builds as well, so one or the other of those wheels you need to choose. And then to complete the build, it does appear to me that there is a tint on Kevin's car. I'm not exactly sure. I certainly did put a tint on there. If you're not sure, then don't. I shall leave that to you. On now then to the final car, the awesomely resto-modded Stingray. Now unfortunately a Coquette Classic cannot hope to look as good, and I've said about this car before. In fact, I've meant to make a video but never have. But really, this car never reminds me much of a C2 Corvette anyway. Oh, that was painful. No, to me, the car actually reminds me in many ways more of the C3, and in fact, I've got one of these done up as a C3 Corvette when I had a chance to look around in real life, and I think it's more convincing as that. Still, there are some C2 parts in it, and it's precisely what we have. And making 10 of these cars was quite challenging because you have to take one or two, like Bad News and like this, where you know the car isn't quite as convincing, but if you don't, you simply can't make 10. I'm not keeping the car like this because I had the Criminal Enterprise pack, so I got this car effectively free, so I just got it and then we'll get rid of it. Anyway, the stock front bumper is actually the best of our options, just keep it simple and chrome, same on the rear. For the exhaust, we definitely want the side exit exhaust. That is one important customization that we can do. And the stock hood actually looks best of the only three options that we have. Again, I stay with the yellowy stock lights. The wide black stripe works very well on the hood, especially to give us what we require. As always, I've gone with the black plate to just hide it in among the paint scheme. Torino red is just a perfect, really bright red. That's from the classic section. I've got a classic black secondary on here, but as I flick through I can't see what it's changing, so perhaps it's only if you pick secondary options. You don't want the roll cage, you do not want a roof, of course. For the wheels, they're not perfect, but I think the ones from the street category, the Cosmo Mark II, are getting pretty close. You have the bulk of the features you want on the wheel there. Painted in black, of course, for the centres, and that completes the build of the Stingray. Well, there's the builds of all 10 of Kevin's cars, and can you please answer me a question down below? Is this a good idea? Obviously 10 builds, a little bit of an intro and an outro. We're talking approaching a half-an-hour video. Now, I've only asked people to watch the builds they are interested in, so just to watch a few minutes. But I'm quite aware that when you see a half-an-hour video in your feed, you're like, oh, I don't want to watch half an hour, I'll forget that, that's just too much. And also, of course, while some builds like the Terminus, I think a lot of people will want to see, some maybe like the Coquette at the end, perhaps nobody wants to see. So, should I do this in future, whenever I do one of these specialised one-off garage tours, where I'm not keeping the cars in many cases beyond, so if I don't do these, the chance for the build video has gone? Or should I just carry on and do what I normally do, build videos for 1, 2 or 3 cars now and again, the things that I think people will like to see? Please let me know down below. I really, really want to know opinion on this, because I've gone a bit off-piste with this one, so let's see what happens. If you liked anything in it, just one of the builds, just anything, give me a like, I would really appreciate that. Obviously, if you think it's rubbish, do dislike it, but tell me why. I occasionally get thumbs down, but nobody ever says why they gave me a thumbs down, so what was the point in leaving it? I don't know. You've achieved nothing without telling me, so please do tell me. Only then can I get better. Anyway, before we do actually hit half an hour, it's time for me to say thank you so much for watching.